Good morning, Richmond. Glad you could be with us this morning. I'm Jason Rusnak from Cutting Edge Physical Therapy. Today, we are celebrating a virtual open house of our new East Side Clinic, which will be opening on March 1st. We were hoping to open next week, but guess what? All of our equipment is stuck in Houston, Texas. So surprise, surprise, but supposedly that should get here this coming week. So we're looking forward to opening here on the East Side to service everybody out here. Now, if we're giving away a bunch of prizes today, so if you haven't signed up, make sure you go to our Facebook page and click on the link that's in one of the posts, or you can like, comment, and share these videos, and that will get you entered into the prizes as well. We talked about a ton of prizes the other day, so go ahead and take a look at all those, and we even got some more yesterday. So we're very excited about that. Thanks for joining us. Today's interview to start at 8 o'clock is Phil Quinn. A lot of you have known him in the past, but we're bringing him in. Phil has been the interviewer on the other side when I've gone into the radio station, and now we're going to flip-flop it. So, and I enjoyed all those times, and he was very gracious when I first came to Richmond. So I'm appreciative of his time this morning, and we're going to bring him into the stream now. Let's make sure we look equal. There we are. Hi, Phil. How are you?
Good. It's early out here. What are you doing to me?
Well, I realize it's very early. Tell everybody what time it is in Arizona.
It's right at 6 o'clock. I got up at 4:30 and have been getting up normally at around 4:30 just because that's my habit. That angers other people that I live with. But got a shower, wanted to make sure I looked good because I'm a radio guy. I got a face of radio, so I had to look the part today.
Well, everybody tells me I have the same face, so we'll just have to deal with our video today. So I appreciate you joining me. I know it's early in the morning. So let's give our viewers a little bit of sense of your connection with Richmond and what you've done here in the past, so they have a little bit of background before we start talking about some other things.
Well, I predominantly worked in radio during my time, 20 plus years in Richmond. Was on city council, so I was an elected official for 2 terms. Really was one of those elected officials that really used social media in order to connect with constituents. And so that got to be a real, more than just a hobby for me. And so over the course of having a radio show, I also started a company in 2013 called Envy Media. And for the most part, what we've done is to be a silent third party. So we would create content, post content, and share content for organizations on their behalf. And then after I was budget cut with the radio station, I decided to kind of open it up a little bit, started doing podcasts, and I've really enjoyed kind of keeping my feet inside radio from a podcast standpoint. And once I moved out to Arizona last fall, really used the podcast to stay connected to people back in Richmond. And of course, during a pandemic, FaceTime, Zoom, doing things like this is just a good way to still stay connected. And it's been a really wonderful thing. Technology is good, especially when your host says, find an Ethernet cable 15 minutes before the show.
Well, hey, you could have used Wi-Fi. I told you it would have been okay. So we're still doing this podcast, and tell people how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so it's called Things You Need to Know. It was a segment that we used to do on the radio show that was just, hey, here's some stuff that you probably didn't hear in the news. And Josh Michaels, who used to work in Richmond, on the radio. He's a good friend. He has started joining me on the podcast, and it's been good to have another person to go through. And so we try to keep it pretty short. We've been going 15, 20 minutes for a while. I think the last week's episode went to about a half an hour, but we try to get it done sometime on Saturday, post it sometime Sunday. For some people, that's the start of the week or a week wrap up. It just sort of depends on when you listen to it. But on all the podcast platforms that are out there, we've had some great listenership. Maybe I think we're close to 19,000 downloads of the pod. So that's been fun. And a lot of those people are in Richmond and Wayne County. And that's great to be able to stay connected that way.
How can people follow you on other social platforms?
You can go on Instagram. I mean, it's all Phil Quinn one on Twitter, Instagram, on Facebook. It's Philip M. Quinn if you want to follow me there. On Vine Media, ONVINE. Back when I started the company, there was an app called Vine. On Vine Media is where you can follow us. And we try to post a daily debate question because we used to do that feature on the radio as well, and get just weird little questions and try to get some people. I think today's question is, what if lying were illegal? And so, it's fun to get some of those answers, and we try to have some. We try to keep it fairly light. That's for sure.
That's great. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Let's get into the topic that we wanted to discuss. This was done some time ago, but you had listed 18 to 20 things, I think, that should be changed in Richmond. Some are extraordinarily obvious. Some are, I think, maybe a little controversial. So I think let's talk about the first one here, which is find your thing. What do you mean by find your thing?
So for a long time, if you were to talk about Richmond and its history, you would talk about Millionaires Row, where we had more millionaires per capita than anything else, and that's where you see a lot of the great architecture that we have. You would talk about lawn mowing, the lawnmower capital of the world. You would have these markers that you would identify with. And for Richmond right now, we're between that really big damn candle and the arch. And there's a 6-mile stretch of I-70 that Richmond sits on that could use its one thing. So if I were to go to a restaurant, say in Newcastle, and say, hey, I've never been here before, what's there to do? Everybody in that town knows that they have the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. So everybody knows without question what to say when someone says, hey, what's there to do here? They've got their one thing. And I think a lot of cities have that. And so for us, I think that would be a really good idea to figure out what that is. If you want to be murals, if you want it to be festivals, if you want it to be the birthplace of jazz, just figure out what it is and then figure out how to wrap all of your tourism and communication and marketing efforts around that one thing. And those are tough conversations to have because everybody's got a different one. But there's got to be something that you can do to highlight your one thing. I always thought next to the solar fields that went up right on I-70 by the was the 165. I can't remember.
156 marker.
156 marker.
Yep.
I always thought make those digital billboards and highlight some of the events that you have on top of having some revenue generating ads on there, so that people driving by go, wow, that sounds interesting. They've got this event going on. There's ice festival. There's a meltdown. What is that? Pull off the road and come and see it. So it's really important for Richmond and Wayne County to find the one thing that everybody would know by default on how to sell it.
Sure, great point. Second one is one countywide school system.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous that Wayne County has 5 public schools. I don't mean to say that they shouldn't. They have enough students to have the number of schools that we do. But do we really need 5 superintendents? Do we need 5 assistant superintendents? Do we need 5 or maybe even 10 administrative assistants? Do we need 1 bus driver? I mean, look what we're dealing with in Indiana now, where we go from a 2-hour delay to closing for almost every school all the time. They all go together. They rarely make a decision that they haven't consulted with another school district. So my philosophy was 5 is a pretty odd number and a pretty good one from a standpoint. Pick 1 school board member from each of those districts and don't change the name. Don't get rid of the basketball rivalries because that's such an important thing. Don't get rid of that stuff. Just say from a hierarchy level, we're going to save some money by not being so top heavy. And we're going to go with Wayne County school system, Wayne County schools, and then let it fly. Let let's see what happens. And I keep hearing, well, that's not doable. That's not able to be done. I'm not so sure that they have looked at it from a standpoint of, let's not care what the people that live and die with the Wayne County basketball tournament and the county schools versus Richmond. And let's not fight that. Let's just really hammer out what the potential savings could be. And I'm not saying take those savings and give them back to taxpayers. Pay teachers. let's add
Give them
some
the
wages
resources.
here. Yes,
Sure.
let's. We know that in classroom learning is better than any other type of learning. I think we.
Oh
can
my
all
gosh,
agree with
that's
that.
controversial, Phil. You can't say that on today's podcast.
Well, this is what you get. This is what you get. A lot of coffee at 5 a.m. and I think it's worth pursuing because of the potential savings that's out there.
Sure. Yeah. You know what? And that's foreign to a lot of people here, but a lot of places around the country have countywide school systems. It's not a big deal. Everybody works together. All the high schools have their own names. They all have their own sporting groups, and they just align all that administration. So I totally understand.
And if you're a superintendent for 5,000 students, why can't you be a superintendent for 10,000 students? I mean, is that too big of a jump? Too big of a leap for an administration team to figure out how to manage 10,000 students instead of 5? I mean, that doesn't seem that big of a difference to me.
Yeah, good question. That might be answered at another time. Yeah. Public-private partnerships for local businesses, including pilot. I didn't know what that was. So,
all right. So pilot is payment in lieu of taxes. And during the 2008 economic crisis, a lot of communities that had really super big, high nonprofits, South Bend, for instance, started receiving a check from Notre Dame to provide city services. And I think that if you really want to start to develop the community, there's got to be a way to offer public entities to be able to invest with private industries and still be able to get the same kind of tax breaks that are available in order to spur on some investment. Now, you see a lot of that, and the EDC has done a good job whenever they have granted some money to initiate some clawbacks. That's always a big thing. But at one time, there was $380 million of taxable property within the city limits, just the city limits, that wasn't taxed. And we have large nonprofits. Of your top 20 employers, I think the 7 or 8 of them are nonprofit, which means they are providing services. They are providing economic value, but we're not getting anything for it. And so offering a payment in lieu of taxes, instead of taxing you, would you mind helping us with road salt or fixing roads or maybe a beautification project? And if you want to develop areas of town, say, for instance, the West Side, you're going to need to sweeten that deal for private investors in order to start building really large buildings and expensive buildings. And I think that we have always kind of steered clear of that. And I think you need to relook at that.
And Jack, that looks into another thing that maybe we should talk about: gambling on the West Side. I saw that one as well.
Yes. Ohio still has not adopted sports betting. And I'm not a gambler. I'm not. But if we had one of those reasons to cross the state line, for a long time, it was the lottery. We had huge Powerball stuff, and then
Right.
Ohio got their Powerball stuff. And I think that people are going to do those things regardless. So why not capitalize on it and put it to where it's worth the drive? If traffic count is a big thing for private investors, well, we just don't see the amount of traffic that we need in order to be able to invest. Well, let's drive that. Let's instead of putting in, a storage unit and on the West Side or a storage facility, how about we put in something that is could help us find our one thing? Now, there's a lot of people that also think that center of town property that had a former hospital in it, maybe that's a good spot to do it because it's so centrally located. But I'm all about trying to figure out how to pull more people off the interstate. And I think sports betting or gambling or slot machines or any of that sort of stuff makes sense to me. Even though the tax revenue is somewhat offset with maybe a little bit of an uptick in crime, but we have been this Quaker community for so long, and I I just think that there are some potential revenue streams that we just haven't decided to grasp, and let's do it now before Ohio does it, and they don't have a reason to come over.
Good point. Let's go back to push back the loop. This might be a little old, but I understand where you're going here with that.
So at the time, of course, doing these over the course of several podcasts, it was apparent during the pandemic that some of the things that we thought were really good ideas and ingenious ideas, and at least moved the city forward, were also going to be a hindrance. And the second phase of the bike loop, for all of the positives that are potentially there once it's done, we don't see a lot of use of it now, but if it were all the way done, maybe there's more people that would utilize them. But for the moment, I think it's okay to go back to the state and go, yeah, we got this thing that is really crushing businesses. And the loop construction for phase 2 also coincides with US 27 bridge right over where that loop is going to go, also being under construction. That's really tough for businesses to go from phase 1 of the bike loop to phase 2 of the bike loop to 27 construction with a pandemic. There's going to be one of the best parts of Richmond, Wayne County is the Depot District. And I think begging for mercy and saying, hey, give me just a little bit more time. Let's finish 27 overpass. Let's get that bridge fixed. Then let's move on to phase 2. Just delay it a little bit seemed to make sense to me. And I just don't know how the governor or the state legislature would go, no, you promised you would do it. You still need to do it, because you're going to cut off a lot of parking. Yeah,
agreed. And anything that we can do to help businesses is probably a pretty smart idea.
And we're not asking, the businesses are not begging for money necessarily. They're just saying, hey, can we just pause this and get one part of this neighborhood fixed and repaired? We're not saying don't do it. We're saying, can we delay a little bit? That actually helps business without spending any extra money.
Sure. Hey, our next topic is make I-70 a toll road.
Yeah. So I-70 may be the worst stretch. Now, I drove 1,900 miles out to Arizona. I went through several states, and Wayne County has good roads. This isn't a shot at Wayne County, but the interstate has been so poorly done and redone in parts, especially Henry County. Henry County, even outside of Wayne, is terrible. That stretch of I-70 from Indianapolis to the state line is some of the worst. And I think if you were to capitalize on it being a toll road, use that money to invest in things that bring the wind down. We see a lot of accidents on this side of I-70, and one of the reasons is because the wind just whips and hits those trucks. And we seem to be this logistical headquarters for a lot of places, Hot Foods, for instance. So when these trucks hit the roads, maybe there's some wind barriers or walls that you can put up to cut that down a little bit, but you can't do it without extra money. And so if you instituted a toll road, I'm sure there's some of us out there that would go, hell, I'm not using that road. Fine, go down National Road, spend some money in some of those smaller towns. Let's bring Cambridge City back a little bit. There's Strawn and Dublin and all these places that you go up to Greenfield where you could spend some local dollars. Some of those businesses seeing some extra traffic would be a bad idea. So a potential negative could be a positive for other communities. So I just thought, make it happen. And at least in Wayne County, those 6 million cars coming from Ohio into Indiana and back and forth, let's pick up a couple of dimes from that. We don't have to make it huge, but isn't there a way that we could capitalize on that?
I think there's a definite way we could capitalize that and make the road better at the same time.
Yes.
Because anytime you travel a turnpike, it's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Yep.
And
all right.
I think that's a way. That's a way to win.
Yeah, sure. Okay, next one. We'll keep moving on here. Recruit a competitive healthcare option.
Yeah. Look, I think a lot of us appreciate Reed Health. I probably have gotten in more trouble in talking about some of the things that Reed has done. What I saw when I was involved in the insurance field, I was a property and casualty agent, but I would talk often with the life and health people and people with group health. And because we're a one horse town, um, and the way that Reed negotiates with insurers is pretty tough, because what they say is, who else you got? And I think there needs to be an answer for that. I think recruiting an IU Health or a St. Vincent's or a competitive hospital, just just to be able to show that there are some other options. We have some large employers in Wayne County that have boosted up their health insurance HSA accounts, or actually put together an employee handbook that says, look, we get it. If it's an emergency, go here. But if you're going to do some of these other things, have you thought about going to Henry County? Have you thought about going over to Ohio? Have you thought about, I mean, companies are trying to figure out a way to not spend all of their health insurance dollars with Reed. Now, they're the largest employer. They're the biggest gorilla. I get how much they give back to communities around the area, but they just took over Fayette Regional Health. They have a monopoly on people that need emergency services. So offering some other competitors out there that could offer the same amount of services, I think is a good thing for the customer. I think competition is good and healthy. And so recruiting that competitor is an important thing for elected officials to do. And I think we should start to ask those questions when they start running for office.
Sure. Grocery cart regulation.
Yeah, I one of the biggest things for me when I first got involved in politics is I saw this lady pushing this shopping cart, and it was full of blankets, and and it wasn't anywhere close to where the shopping cart originated. And I thought, oh my God, this is my first homeless person that I've seen. I'm now an elected official. I probably ought to do something about this. And then this little head popped up, and she was using the grocery cart as a stroller. And that's not its intent. And you see a lot of people that will push a cart down Walmart's hill, and then they take it to the senior apartments that are back there, and then they're not going to push it back up the hill. They just leave it there. And so there's actually a retention pond by Richmond 40 Bowl where people just push carts in. And so Walmart has to spend this money, and Kroger has to spend this money to either replace the carts, which run 150 to 200 bucks a piece. And my thought is, Aldi has solved this problem with a quarter.
Right.
You never see all these carts anywhere, and Aldi's is a good place to shop. So why couldn't we institute something similar to say, look, grocery carts, very important thing. We're not going to expect you to return it to the cart return, because you're just not a good person if you don't do that. But okay, whatever. But if we have quarters, people will bring those carts back. And I think that that's a small thing, but it always kind of had this thing, because cars would avoid shopping carts in traffic. There'd be a cart that sits on a sidewalk. It's just not a good look for people that are coming into the area that is new. And some of the biggest culprits out there aren't the big box retailers. It's people that don't have cars. So let's figure that out. And let's figure out a way to make returning a cart an important thing, even if it's only a quarter.
And let's fix that problem for people who need that assistance too. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
The Dollar Tree just opened next door to us on the west side, which you might not know about. But one of our staff members lives about 2 miles away, and guess where one of those carts were? It hasn't even been open a week, and one of those carts was 2 miles away. So I'm right there with you. Less park property. That seems like counterintuitive to me a little bit.
Yeah. So the Parks Department is one of the budgets in the city that is always on the chopping block of getting budget cuts. When I was on city council, if you were going to cut the police budget, if you were going to cut the fire department budget, but here comes the Parks Department to present their budget, and you go, $2.5 million for all the park property here. Well, it's to maintain all those parks. Okay, well, are they using all of those parks? And I just think that the Parks Department gets an unfair shake because they're responsible for maintaining all of downtown. And they're also responsible for these little parks that used to be used in neighborhoods. Now, if people are using them, I don't want to get rid of them. And when Elstro Plaza was being proposed, there were a few people out there that went, we don't have enough parks. Well, what we found is that Elstro Plaza is actually a pretty good thing. And
Yeah,
that
it's been a great thing.
location of parks is kind of important. And we want to be able to put more resources into the parks that people use. Well, how can you do that if every single budget year, the parks superintendent is coming in going, I need more money, and people on city council and the mayor are like, well, we're not going to give it to you because the police kind of need it more. Is there a way to take some of that park property that's not being used, get it back into the tax rolls, get it back into maybe some potential development? We do have a housing shortage in Wayne County. Could we capitalize on that by a housing development that is going in a neighborhood that probably could use it more than they could use an unused tire swing? I just think that was never really looked at in an important way. But the Parks Department does a great job. Don't get me wrong. I'm just thinking if you had a little bit less obligations, if you didn't have to go and mow so much, could you spend more time cutting down some of those dead trees?
Yeah, and I think the park department does a great job, and they've really come a long way in probably the last 5 years. So
yeah,
but I totally understand that.
yeah.
Hey, we should be on Central Time Zone, shouldn't we?
Yes. And the reason is because how often do we see a 2-hour delay because it's just too cold? Or how often during the course of the school year are kids at bus stops in the complete dark? Do we really need to be on New York time, or did it always make sense for Indiana to be on Central Time? And I mean, I would scream about this every time because we're just not located in a place for us to have the advantages of being on New York time as opposed to Chicago. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. But whatever Indiana would choose to do, just do it for the whole state. There are still parts of the state that do not observe Eastern time. And as a place that I'm moving to now that doesn't observe daylight savings time, it's still a train wreck every March, every November, when you go from being 2 hours behind to being 3 hours behind. And so Arizona's got some of its own issues, but in Indiana, just adopt the whole state. And I think the whole state could move to Central Time. Plus, we can also watch our shows either at 9 o'clock or at 8 o'clock. we get a little extra that we used to be able to enjoy when we didn't observe daylight savings time. So
I totally agree. I spent some time with my sister and brother-in-law in Austin, Texas back in October, and watching all the football games earlier was much better than watching them later. No question about it.
Yes, right. We'll do it.
We talked about gambling in Richmond's West Side. We also touched a little bit about digital signs, maybe on I-70 to really promote Wayne County. I think that's a great idea. You have been a proponent for some stronger fireworks rules, and why don't we just touch base on that a little bit?
I just think you permit it. When I was living in Richmond, there were rules and there are rules, but they're not enforced. And I get it. They don't have the police force in order to be able to monitor these whole things. But there are people that can buy some really expensive fireworks, some really big fireworks, without any repercussions of setting their neighbor's house on fire. I mean, outside of the liability that would be there. And, out here, it's a dry climate. And so it's a lot more restrictive. That doesn't mean that people don't set off fireworks, but there are some pretty tough rules. And I think you shorten the time that you can set them off. You shorten the hours. And then you say, look, if you want to have a big fireworks show, that's fine. Sign a permit. Let's make sure that you've got a certain limit of liability insurance. Let's make sure that the fire department, you submit a photo online and it says, hey, we've got all of our stuff here for our fire safety. Here's the hose. Here's how far we are away. You can do that stuff digitally now. And it just seemed like no matter what happens during, especially even a month around a holiday where it's appropriate to set off fireworks, Shelton Fireworks goes 3 shifts. They're open 24 hours. Now, if you are going to go at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little alcohol in your breath, and you're going to buy some fireworks, you're not going to wait till tomorrow to set those up.
No.
and and I'm fine if you want to spend $2,000 on your fireworks display to make your kids feel happy. That's fine. Just let's have some rules in place. This isn't that hard. Plus, I'll be able to sleep, and there is something to be said for the torture that some animals go through. People that are veterans that have some PTSD. You know, there are some actual issues with having a longer, wider period to set off fireworks. You know, let's shorten it up. You want a weekend? All right, fine. Here's your weekend. Set off, make all the booms you want. And then after that, there's going to be a pretty significant penalty if we start catching you setting off big boom booms. You know, it's the big ones that are such a problem.
Sure. Great information. The last 2 things we have, and I told you I'd get you out of here in like 30, 35 minutes, so we're right where we need to be. One, community calendar. I think that's pretty apparent. If we have some place where everybody knows what's going on, is that what you're talking about?
We have been in this situation for a long time. Radio stations have community calendars. WayNet has a community calendar. Visit Richmond has their events calendar. The Chamber has their calendar. It all makes sense on why you want to highlight what you have, but we never put forth the dollars to centralize that, and it takes some work. Jane Holman at WayNet does an amazing job. There's a lot of information on there, and I think there's a way to set up a website that we all know how to get to, that it rolls off your tongue. So if our one thing is tough to come up with, then let's maybe just highlight the one place where all that information is. Now, it's really difficult, Jason, to be able to highlight everything from book clubs to AA meetings to places that are having events at bars to pub crawls. I mean, there's a lot of information that could go on this calendar. So what's a way to sort it? What's a way to filter some of those events? And then everybody chips in a little bit of money to make sure that one person has all of that done every single month. And then figure out how all of those other organizations can link to that calendar so they can still have their own spot and sell their own ads around it. And then let's have some fun in promoting it. You know, that's where you get back to your signage and some other things. We've got a lot of really cool things to do. And if we can't find our one thing, then let's at least find one place to go and find the thing that's interesting to you. And it's not that hard, but it is expensive. People think websites you can do for $500. Well, you also have to pay the person. You also have to put the back end together to make it look good. We have a lot of great websites and a lot of great organizations that do a lot of cool stuff. What's a way to filter all of that into one hub so that everybody can benefit from that? And I just think it's better than necessarily a Facebook group where so many of us learn that there's stuff going on. So there's a way to do it. It's just a matter of spending money.
And that might be something for home in Wayne County. I mean, that's a pretty neat organization that's really trying to do some great work. And that might be something along their lines, right?
Home in Wayne is an initiative by the EDC. And what happens with a lot of these cases, and this is no offense to any of those other organizations, but they're all driven by either tax dollars, they're all driven by donations, membership dollars. In some cases, they're getting economic income development tax, they're getting edit taxes, they're getting hotel taxes. So no one wants to necessarily lose opportunities to gain dollars. So Home in Wayne is an initiative that is funded by the EDC, but their budget is also limited. And so is there a way that somebody can initiate the conversation and say, look, we're willing to put in $15,000, but we have to do that every year. are you willing to put in $15,000? And you need those executive directors that do a lot of conversing. They meet a lot, they talk about a lot, but it actually takes some investment in order to get it done. Again, this is something that I think your elected officials could initiate. They could drive and say, until you have this one unique calendar, this one unique URL, we're going to hold some money until you have that initiative put in place. And I think that that's something that would at least eliminate a lot of overlap, because people, if I'm holding an event, do you know how many places I have to contact in order to get it out there?
Yeah, a lot.
So I mean, I got to call WayneNet, I got to call the Tourism Bureau, I got all these things I got to do, and so I don't care who takes the ball, just somebody take it and run with it and see if we can't develop something.
Sure. Hey, I just want to let you know that Kathy said, Phil, you need to come back and run for mayor. I don't think that's going to happen anytime in the near future, is it?
There's plenty of bald guys with radio experience that can run for mayor. I don't need to do it. And I heard that Dave Snow has grown hair back. Did you know this?
I have not.
It's a shot. I thought he was one of the guys. I thought he was one of the brethren, and he has grown his hair back. Very depressing.
I can't wait to see. I'll have to put up a picture of him later today. Okay. Hey, I am extraordinarily grateful for your time this morning. I just want you to have maybe 1 second to say, what's something you've moved to a new area. What's the one thing you look back on in Richmond and you say, you know what, that's a great place to live. I'm not from here. I'm a transplant. I like living here. So is there that one thing where you go, this was so great to live here because?
Yes, there is. Richmond is in Wayne County. They're almost too self-aware. It's almost like they see and hear a lot of the negative stuff that's out there, or maybe it's some goofball story, or maybe it's Batman standing on top of a big black car, and they think that that's funny, and they think that that's a negative. And since moving out to Arizona, I look at Wayne County and all the positive that is out there. But the people that live in town still think there's so much negative. It's true. There are less opportunities in Richmond than there are in Phoenix, Arizona. Richmond has tried to compare itself to Indianapolis and to Dayton because that's where we are. But is it better for Richmond to compare itself to Muncie or Anderson? Are those easier places to compete with? And it's so easy to get in your car and go someplace else that a lot of people think that Richmond's best days are in its past, but it's not. The thing that makes Richmond great is the people. It will always be the people. And so often we find so much negative to talk about. They think everybody else, we're laughing at us, and so everybody else is, and that's not quite the case. When I look at what's going on in Richmond via social channels and via what's going on in news, I don't see the negatives that I thought I might. But you might look at that and go, oh, Richmond, yeah, that's not going well. And that's not what's happening. There are a lot of really great things happening, a lot of contributions and people supporting each other. And that carries more weight when you see it from an outsider's perspective than maybe what we see when we look inside. We see a store that just closed down after 50 years and you go, oh, that's it. We're never going to have a cool store again. Well, that's not true. And there's usually probably some other extenuating circumstances on why that business is closing. The owner's retiring, couldn't find somebody to sell it to. Or it's a pandemic and we just don't have as much money in the bank as we thought in order to keep the place open. It's not a shot at Richmond. It's a shot at bad business ownership or the climate. So don't ever think that everybody else is laughing at you because you live in Richmond. That's not the case. A lot of people want to live in Richmond because of the people.
Sure. Well, it's been a great time. It's good to see you. We miss you here. And it was such a great discussion today. A lot of people have commented. So I'm really appreciative of your time. And I told you I'd get you out of here. And hopefully I'll see you soon.
I look forward to seeing you too. It's always great to be able to catch you on the First English Facebook page. And I wish you all the best with the new location. I'm sorry that stuff is frozen in the tundra of Texas. But I do wish you all the best. Expanding your business is an investment in the community, and we don't always say thanks for that. So thank you for your investment in the community.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And just to remind folks, if you're getting in on the contest, you need to like, share, and comment on the video. We'll put you in the drawing. And you can also go to the Facebook page for the website where you can get into and put your information in. So thanks, Phil. It's been great talking to you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks. See ya.